Today I'm reviewing Aquaman, War for the Throne. Now, I don't really have a lot of intelligent things to say about this, so fingers crossed this should be a short review. I know in the past, if you've watched this channel, I have a tendency to ramble on, but fingers crossed, let's try and keep this review under 15 minutes. That's short for this channel, at least. So I got this comic book from a local bookstore here in Vietnam, where I'm currently living. Normally, I get my comic books from the library, but the school was closed for the Christmas break, and I'd finished the comic books I had already taken out of the school library. So I stopped by the bookstore and decided to get myself a little Christmas gift. There are more American comic books in Vietnamese bookstores now than there were 9 years ago when I first arrived in Vietnam, but the selection is still limited. And this reflects that limited selection. If I had had a greater selection, I might have selected something from a superhero I know more about, or maybe from a comic book from my own, from a period I was familiar with, the early 90s when I was actively collecting DC Comics. But this is what was there, so this is what I picked up. The price was reasonable. It's a thin comic book, but you're only paying about $10 for this, or actually a little bit less on the exchange rate. I'm not sure why this is less. Usually you pay more for comics in Vietnam because they were imported, but maybe because this comic is a few years older and maybe it was failed to sell. I don't know. So the cover shows what looks like Jason Momoa, but actually that's not the Aquaman depicted in this series. Let me see if I can find a good picture of Aquaman. Yeah, it's the classic short-haired Aquaman that the looks like the one who was in Super Friends, etc. So I think they just put Jason Momoa's image on here to try and sell more copies. I'm inclined to take a point off for false advertising, but I don't know. Maybe these covers are just all part of the fun. I really know very little about Aquaman, and I attribute that mostly to the fact that Aquaman did not have his own title during the period when I was actively collecting DC Comics, which, if memory serves, was around tail end of 93, or I guess maybe, no, 94 and 95. 1994 and 1995. I was looking on Wikipedia, and it looks like Aquaman title had just gotten canceled shortly before that time. I think Aquaman has struggled to maintain his own steady title over the years. Sometimes he has his own title, sometimes he doesn't. But it's definitely not like Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman, where they are always in print. He goes through periods when he is out of print, and he was out of he did not have his own title during the period when I was actively into DC Comics. If he had been in print, I'm sure I would have picked up a few of his issues back then. I tried to pick up a few issues of all the popular superheroes, but he wasn't in print, so I didn't pick up any issues. So consequently, I know very little about him. I think I know Aquaman has been a punchline for who knows how long, ever since the Family Guy in the late 90s, I guess. But I always thought that he could be kind of a cool superhero if he's done right, because you can get into that whole fascination about all the strange stuff under the sea, the colorful fish and the sea creatures and the kingdoms and stuff like that. At least I imagine that could be fun. Like I said, I never really read any Aquaman comics. This comic plays into that a little bit. Not as much as they could, and as you can maybe see from these pictures I'm flipping through, most of this takes place on land, where Aquaman is defending the land against an invasion by his brother. I don't know if you can also tell by these pages I'm flipping through, but you can see there's a lot of other DC heroes here: Batman, Wonder Woman, Batman, who all get a lot of time on this. And the reason is This collection incorporates Aquaman 14 to 16 and Justice League 15 to 17. Now, these are very low numbers, but this is because this is from the New 52 series after DC reset its continuity. I believe this was in around 2010 period. I did look this up, but I forgot. Let's see, is it here? Oh yeah. So I think this collection was published in 2018, but these comics are from 2012, 2013. It looks like. So this is an area of continuity in DC Comics, which I also know very little about. Again, my time I was actively reading them was in the early to mid 90s. So they are, it looks like from these stories that they're in the process of resetting their continuity yet again. It's something DC has a problem with, just constantly rebooting themselves. The superheroes like Superman here looks a lot younger than I normally picture him. I normally picture Superman as about 30, and here it looks like he's, I don't know, 23 or 25. Maybe in the scale of things, that's not that much younger. All the superheroes seem a lot younger. I guess this must have been part of the reboot. Or a bit younger, depending on what you think a lot younger is. The story itself is a fairly standard superhero story. There's a big bad guy, all the superheroes team up to defeat him, end of story. But it's told well. The artwork is good. It makes sense for the most part. It's easy to follow what's going on, even as a complete newcomer to this series. Here's a good example of showcasing the colorfulness and exoticness of Under the Water, which I imagine would be Aquaman's main appeal. Now this, because this is part of an ongoing comic book series, we are kind of jumping in to the middle of an ongoing story here. Although there are some flashbacks here, which set up something which is not paid off. So Aquaman is meeting, he's finding out his origin story. He's meeting someone from Atlantis who talks about how his mother was killed, possibly by his brother. Who killed her? I believe it was your brother, her own son. After her death, he became king of Atlantis. So Aquaman goes in to kind of find what's going on. And then we just skip. But then we go to another flashback. And then we're skipping around all in time. So that mystery of whether or not Aquaman's brother killed his mother is just dropped completely. Now, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to assume that that's because this was already covered elsewhere in the comic series at this time. So, I would have to read Aquaman issues 1 to 13 to find out. Or it looks like these have been collected in other editions here. So you can read the entire epic. So Aquaman Volume 1, Aquaman Volume 2. This one here, I guess, is Aquaman Volume 3. So after kind of jumping around in time and setting things up that are not paid off, but are presumably paid off elsewhere in this series, and if you're a comic book reader, you just come to accept that any one collection is only going to give you a fragment of the larger story. We do get to our main story, which is that there's an attack on Atlantis. Atlantis retaliates by attacking the human world. Aquaman wants time to negotiate with his brother. Batman and the rest of the Justice League want to bring his brother to justice immediately, which leads to some conflict with Aquaman. So there's some, good drama between the Justice League characters here, and makes for some interesting dynamics. It's well told. The only part that lost me a little bit was when Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were imprisoned in this they're imprisoned under the sea in these chambers here, and Aquaman can communicate with Batman somehow with way I'm not quite sure. I guess they have a communicator. But then Aquaman says, where does he say it? He drops his communicator, but he's still able to communicate with Batman somehow. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. Oh yeah, I dropped my communicator, so I'm going to need you to talk me through the area. Well, if he dropped his communicator, how is Batman talking to him? That, I think, is really the only major complaint I have, of something that didn't make sense to me. The other things are plot lines that are unresolved, and I would assume are resolved elsewhere. Sorry, I'm realizing I just opened myself up by saying that's the only thing that didn't make sense to me. There's probably a ton of stuff that doesn't make sense here if I would go back and remember all of it. But yeah. Leaving that aside, it was an enjoyable read, well told. The pictures were very clear in establishing what they needed to establish. The relationship between Aquaman and his brother was good and a little bit sad at the end, as Aquaman has turned his brother over to justice, even though his brother claims he was only just defending his people. Sorry. Spoilers, by the way. And I wouldn't call this one of the greatest comic books of all time, but certainly a fun little read. It would get a recommendation.